Emotional Intelligence, Part 2. Anyone can become angry. That's easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, this is not easy. Aristotle. As a refresher, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand our conditioned responses, to observe our emotions while being in touch with our feelings, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. We added the following tools to the equation: the expanded STOP method. S, stop what you're doing. T, take a breath. And O, observe your thoughts, sensations, or moods by scanning your upper body and locating the areas of greatest sensation, and then breathe through that area until the sensation is reduced or fades away. And then P, proceed with the day. Rewiring with a hammer and chisel. In this series, we add to our EQ toolbox a rewiring process, the fully expanded STOP method. In a meditative state, we first recreate in our mind's eye a particular troubling emotional moment and observe our inner body's responses. Then we concentrate on the negatively charged internal representation associated with this emotional moment. We then go mentally to those unwanted internal representations and rewire them. The meditative process of rewiring involves a more hands-on, graphic visual process, where we do a bit of sculpting electrical work by knocking out with a hammer our negative internal representations. We then chisel in a new positive internal representation. We go from being an electrician to a carpenter in order to add a little more graphic imagery to help with the transmutation. Every moment I shape my destiny with a chisel. I am a carpenter of my own soul. Rumi. This process of specific rewiring furthers our ability to reprogram our minds to pull out some of the negative internal representations. These negative images end up being like bad apples in our emotional barrel. The associated negative conditioned responses end up creating situations, relationships, and circumstances that do not work for us. Even though we may want to change them, we keep getting spun back into those same predicaments over and over again. And the reason for this conditioned straitjacket is very simple. When we experience a traumatic event, a strong neural pathway is laid down in our brains that interprets any similar event in the future in terms of the old one. The prior trauma colors it as being threatening or highly negative. Then we respond, as we have in the past to that event or stimulus, in a defensive and sometimes inappropriate way. These inappropriate responses are the ones that we want to focus upon, because we want our lives to work for us, not against us. So it becomes very important to be able to change our emotional patterns of behavior. What is important as we do these exercises is that we do not evoke our avoidance responses. We do not let fear dictate which situations you want to avoid, because those will probably be the most important ones. Of course, the good news is that for every stimulus and response pattern, there's a link between the two, the internal representations. These internal representations determine how the stimulus is perceived, whether negatively or positively. If it is negative, the sympathetic nervous system is activated for fight or flight. And if it is a positive internal representation, our parasympathetic nervous system will activate. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor. Meditation. I now invite you again to sense your inner body. While you do so, take 3 gentle breaths. And now mentally scan your upper body to make an emotional physical assessment. Now gently breathe through the area of greatest sensation until that sensation is lessened or disappears. Great. Thank you. The beauty of this work is that we discover the incredible healing powers of our consciousness when directed in the right place and in an appropriate state of awareness. This healing consciousness helps us learn to do the right thing when we're overcome with emotions. First of all, we would not be able to do this practice if we had not been learning how to focus our awareness like a laser beam to create desired neural pathways, which was unheard of before we started reading or doing the JTE meditation. These newly established pathways can positively impact our levels of success and happiness. We can then become more contented and more engaged in our personal lives and our workplace. Look, we all want to be happier. I have mentioned that my definition of happiness links happiness to the amount of time one spends experiencing one's higher self. Now, maybe that is the definition of being super happy. Another way to become happier while we're in the ego mind is by transforming our most highly negative responses to the world around us into positive ones. Even after this series is over, we can reprogram ourselves on our own with the new tools we've learned. Each time that we become aware of a conditioned response that keeps hurting us, we can become that sculptor, electrical engineer, by knocking out one negative internal representation and carving in a new positive one. I must say that this process is best done in a meditative state because it needs for you to be laser focused. The tools we are learning now are endless in their potential value. We may transform our responses from the smallest nuisances to the most important relationships. What a blessing. Dealing with anger. When you deal with anger, you need to detach from the idea that you are angry. Instead of considering that this particular anger is an integral part of you, consider that you have an emotion that is anger. In this exercise, you observe this emotion in the same way as you did with your thoughts going by. This exercise is one that becomes relatively easy as we strengthen our ability to be an observer of our emotions and thoughts, as opposed to being identified with them and being run by them. Meditation. I invite you again to sense your body right now. Now take those 3 delicious, gentle breaths. Think of something you're angry about. Wait a moment. Now mentally scan your upper body to find where that negative thought created a sensation. If you find it, gently breathe through that sensation until it is lessened or disappears. Great. Thank you. Transmuting anger into love. Our anger is a form of energy. Usually, when we experience anger, we are not lucid. Our spiritual practices will allow us over time to transform the energy of anger into that of love and/or compassion. In being present and mindful, we may become lucid enough to make that happen. We can apply our powerful transformational process to either our personal lives or coworkers and work situations. Your transformational ability comes from shining your light of awareness onto those situations that you want to make better. Remember that the biggest changes start with your inner work, which you process through awareness. Solutions will begin to take root. Some things will happen immediately, and others will take longer. In the book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, Daniel Goleman shows that one's perspective on one's own emotional situation from an observer's standpoint is a critical step along the path of becoming fully aware. A belligerent samurai, an old Japanese tale goes, once challenged a Zen master to explain the concept of heaven and hell. The monk replied with scorn, "You're nothing but a lout. I can't waste my time with the likes of you." His very honor attacked, the samurai flew into a rage and, pulling his sword from its scabbard, yelled, "I could kill you for your impertinence." "That," the monk calmly replied, "is hell." Startled at seeing the truth in what the master pointed out about the fury that had him in its grip, the samurai calmed down, sheathed his sword, and bowed, thanking the monk for the insight. "And that," said the monk, "is heaven." The sudden awakening of the samurai to his own agitated state illustrates the crucial difference between being caught up in a feeling and becoming aware that you are being swept away by it. Socrates' injunction, "Know thyself," speaks to the keystone of emotional intelligence, awareness of one's own feelings as they occur. The lesson of this story is true to life, yet it's incredibly hard to change your behavior patterns once you find yourself swept up in an emotionally conditioned response. This is true for almost everyone. That is why the fully expanded STOP method is so crucial in changing your most emotionally charged behavior patterns. You rewire yourself while you're in a meditative, peaceful state. In that state, you're not in the so-called heat of battle. When future battles do occur, the rewired switch mechanism transforms a negative to a positive response. We can then be fully prepared to deal with the emotional crises that pertain to specific situations prior to their arrival. Meditation. I now again invite you to take 3 gentle breaths. Imagine for a moment a major anger that you may hold in your being. Now separate that anger from yourself and hold it out in front of you and breathe into it for a few times and let it evaporate. Great. As an example, I changed the internal representations of my older brother, Gene. Starting from infancy and while growing up, he would periodically try to make my life miserable. He admitted recently that he had no empathy for me. I would add that he had no mercy for me. Nevertheless, we reestablished our relationship on a positive footing after a long hiatus. I then applied the fully expanded stop method tool to lock in a love-based relationship. We've been very close ever since. In doing the exercise, I created an image of my brother as a small boy sitting on my mother's lap in our living room. They both sat in our big brown leather easy chair that we had in our second-floor Bronx apartment. Both my mother and brother held their arms wide open. They were welcoming me to sit on their laps while offering me all of their love. This image worked perfectly. Every time now, when I think about my brother, the first image that comes to mind is the revised scene of my imagination. He has his arms wide open to embrace me with love. Our newly enhanced emotional intelligence is so powerful that it can be regarded as a kind of super awareness or super emotional intelligence. It possesses the ability to positively affect the emotions of others as well. An emotionally intelligent person can influence the behaviors of other people as a result. As it pertains to leadership, emotional intelligence has 5 main elements: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. What we're learning in this series is more than emotional intelligence. By analogy of being a sculptor or electrical engineer in a neuronal sense, we are designing new pathways that create new positive results. It is our engineering consciousness that makes this all possible through our ability to focus our awareness as wide as the universe, or in our case, as narrowly as a single neural network. One of the most important things to know about our conscious awareness is that when we shine our light on things and come from our higher self, we will always choose what is right for us. If this is true, then we can derive great comfort in trusting the great wisdom that our higher self can offer up to us. I always go back to the miracle of the physical body, how intricate it is, and how all of the moving parts work together in an incredibly complex synchrony. That same intelligent force is intricately linked to our consciousness. As you go about your day, when you're presented with a transformed situation or relationship, which you've created through your new internal representations, become mindful and acutely aware of the new inner and outer events that you've established. Breathe life into this new internal representation, make it prominent, and give it good energy. I do hope that these exercises on rewiring negative situations were of interest to you. We intervene to target the emotional triggers and to successfully diffuse them. It can take time to be successful at this kind of inner work. It will not always be a big success immediately, but change will happen. As the famous adage states, you give a poor man a fish and you feed him for a day. You teach him to fish and you give him an occupation that will feed him for a lifetime. Anna Isabella Thackeray Ritchie. Meditation. Let's do a nice breath awareness exercise. I invite you to count to 10 while counting the first inhalation as number 1 and the following exhalation as number 2, and so on until you get to number 10. If you get lost in thought, just return back to the number you remember you were on and continue again to number 10. Breath awareness, mechanics, and benefits. We always have to return to the breath because it is our greatest tool to get back to the present moment while playing a big part in maintaining our emotional equilibrium. Breath awareness is like a flue to a chimney that allows the hot air and carbon particles from a fireplace to escape to the outside. If you haven't bent down to look up into the chimney from the perspective of the fireplace while trying to avoid soot on your hands and clothes, you probably do not know what a flue looks like. A flue is a metal plate with a hinge, which allows the plate to flap. The flue can open and close the air passageway that connects the fireplace to the chimney. The flue also has a handle that allows one to adjust its angle, regulating the amount of air to feed the fire, while the hot air escapes up the chimney to the outside. When the flue is adjusted just right, the fire burns nicely. If there's not enough oxygen flowing, the fire can sputter and go out. The same thing is true with our bodies. How we breathe, consciously or unconsciously, determines how much oxygen gets into our bodies. The amount of oxygen that gets to our brains has a lot to do with affecting our level of consciousness. When the brain receives just the right amount of oxygen, our ego minds, which are designed to protect us from danger, become relaxed. Things must be okay if we're getting ample oxygen. Thus, when we do conscious breathing, our ego mind begins to go quiet. Most of the time, we want the ego mind to be quiet so that we can consciously connect with our higher self. Breathing can instantly make that happen. However, when we become stressed and fear is taking us over, we either take shallow breaths or hold our breaths unconsciously. When our bodies are not getting ample amounts of oxygen, the amygdala becomes alarmed because something must be wrong and alerts the sympathetic nervous system. Since we are usually caught up in our heads thinking about the future or the past, there's no one home in the present moment to have any awareness that your existing distress is due to you, yourself, not breathing properly. When you become mindful in the present moment, you discover that you are strangling yourself. Once you gently return your breath back to normal, your stress will decline, and you can return to a sense of well-being. Breathing is the one physical function that is both involuntary, which means it goes on by itself, and voluntary, which means that we can control our respiration consciously. The breath is the key to our conscious control over the autonomic nervous system. the part of our system that lies outside of our awareness and runs entirely unconsciously. The autonomic nervous system has two major components, which include the sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight centers, and the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, or feed and breathe system. Both are key determinants to our emotional responses and balance. To positively impact your emotions, you need to harness the breath as the key tool and foundation for your emotional intelligence. The breath can stimulate the parasympathetic system and quiet the sympathetic system. The breath can help remove stresses in our bodies. The breath can help quiet the ego mind to keep it out of the way of experiencing our higher self. The breath can help us blow away the negative energies in our bodies. The breath can increase the energy we put into certain images and processes that enhance our well-being. Finally, we use our breath to stay in a state of awareness. The breath is like a magic wand. Forgiveness and love. Quote, "There is no love without forgiveness, and there is no forgiveness without love." Bryant McGill, author and actor. To experience true love, one must let go of anger and hatred and forgive. To love others requires that we love ourselves. Remember, we have a love projector inside of us that shines out only as brightly as the inner love we have for ourselves. A lack of forgiveness can have a long-term impact on our personalities, as this anecdote from my own childhood illustrates. As a child, out of revenge, I pulled down my brother's pants in front of our friends at summer camp, soon after he had broken his leg. I intended to embarrass him for all of the terrible things he had done to me. I did so at a time when he was weak and vulnerable. All of my camp friends were shocked. They called me the monster from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, riffing on the movie of the same name. I learned an important lesson. I needed to develop a nice guy persona in order to get their friendship back and their forgiveness. This was a major turning point in my life and led to my developing more socially acceptable behaviors. However, unconsciously, I did not forgive myself at that point. It was not until I became an adult that I discovered my own self-love was weak and that I had to learn to forgive myself as part of my healing process. Residual anger and forgiveness. Once positive behavioral patterns begin to replace negative ones, we experience relief and delight. However, in our emotional life, there's still the potential for residual anger or resentments over past injuries. In order for positive internal representations to be reinforced, forgiveness and compassion are essential. The ego mind will hold on to anger as a defense mechanism, but the higher self will let it go and come from its innate qualities, like love and compassion. This does not mean you need to ignore the fact that you've suffered, but you do not want to walk around carrying hot coals in your hands while they keep burning into your flesh. Let the coals go for the sake of peace. Peace liberates us from the past without denial. We accept past conflicts and misdeeds, but without the lingering stress. If our objective is to be fully present, forgiveness is key to letting go of the past. Meditation. Now I invite you again to take those 3 gentle, deep breaths. Now take a moment to send love, compassion, and forgiveness to a person towards whom you have a lot of negative emotions. Now take 3 more gentle breaths. Trauma is traumatic. Most of us find ourselves in a straitjacket, comprised of a thick fabric of traumatic events and conditioned responses. Luckily, within this fabric, there are strands of change and transformation. There is fertile ground in the spaces that exist between stimulus and response. At the right time, our internal representations can be changed. We may receive a new flow of insights, motivations, and desires which encourage us to take action. As an adult, my understanding of my childhood family situation became clearer when my brother admitted to me that he had had no empathy for me. His admission and our joint therapy over the phone allowed us to heal our relationship. Many of us find ourselves in situations that just do not work for us, but we tolerate them anyway. Tolerance is not always the best solution while enduring degrading circumstances. Sometimes, while meditating on past trauma, you cannot exactly pinpoint the context or history in which negative internal representations were generated. These may be derived from an abusive childhood, a chronic family matter, an isolated trauma at any age, or a longer-term source of stress. It is quite normal for us to stuff these traumatic experiences into our subconscious so we don't have to face them, because we do not know how to deal with them. Also, we are fearful of them. We feel we will be hurt. Why keep having to experience those horrible feelings over and over again? Unfortunately, holding those feelings inside affects us in unseen ways. A lot of times it can be the cause of illness because of all the inner turmoil that's rumbling through our pain body. That is why we want to start uncovering them, and meditation is one of the best ways to do that, in order to process them so that they do not keep negatively hurting us and keeping us from being happy and healthy. The complexity of projections. Quite often, what makes our self-awareness work even more difficult is that our conflicts derive from our own projections. We tend to blame other people for issues that really stem from within us. When we're not happy with ourselves, it usually stems from being angry with ourselves. Then we become angry with others around us, and we start fights with them. Maybe not so much about what they're doing, but just because we're irritated with ourselves. It's hard to admit this fact and even sense that our internal issues may play a big role in creating the external issues. When we have issues with another, it's a good idea to first ask ourselves whether the problem is with ourselves or the other person, or sometimes both. Some people do the opposite. They blame themselves for issues that originate with others. If you're someone who's struggling to empathize with another, it would be hard to understand why someone is doing something negative to you, and you end up just blaming yourself. A lot of this confusion stems from the striking difference between the way the ego mind looks at the world compared to the higher self. The ego mind will be in the blame game, blaming either yourself or others. The higher self will look at things more holistically, from a position of love, and see how the total interaction and environment contributed to the resulting situation. Through our emotional intelligence exercises, it is good that we're directing the energies from inside ourselves in new ways. Again, this process is complicated, but it is best to start with the inner work to see what's going on inside yourself as you begin to sort things out. We should also trust that our higher self has the capabilities to work through anything that comes up. Taking responsibility, an anecdote about Gandhi. Let me share with you this charming story about Gandhi. A mother brought her son to Gandhi, asking Gandhi to urge her son to stop eating so much sugar. Gandhi agreed, but told the mother to come back with her son in 2 weeks. So they left and returned 2 weeks later. Then Gandhi obliged her by advising her son to stop eating sugar. The mother thanked Gandhi, but after her son left the room, she asked Gandhi why he had not just told her son to stop eating sugar during the first visit. Gandhi said, "Because I needed the 2 weeks to stop eating sugar myself." The moral of this story is that Gandhi didn't feel he could give advice which he couldn't follow himself. Gandhi's famous quote puts it this way: "Be the change you want to see in the world." Psychotherapy. It is important to mention that sometimes there are limitations to a meditative approach, and to simply express forgiveness is not always the answer. Psychotherapy may be necessary as an adjunct to meditation and spirituality. Some traumas are so severe that we wall them off totally. Even if we try hard to search and to uncover them, we cannot shine the light of awareness upon them. Psychotherapy may be what is best. If you feel you need outside professionals to help you, we strongly urge you to consult them. Taking a stand. There are times when a person needs to stand up and express their outrage to the party who's been the source of the abuse. One must sometimes ask for or demand justice. Meditation. I now invite you to sense your body right now. Now take 3 gentle breaths. And now feel how the body feels. Focus on the area in your body with the most pronounced sensation and breathe in and out through that area until it feels less intense or disappears.